Hello, my name is Abraham Klein, and this is Yinzer Club. First episode. This is the first episode. Welcome to the Yinzer Club studios. Not really much of a studio. It's actually my bedroom, and also my office. Sometimes my dinner table, depending on what's going on. Hopefully, eventually, we'll upgrade to something better. And maybe we'll do a couple shows at the Idiot Radio Studios. Who knows? But today we're going to just sort of do a bit of an introductory episode for those of you who may be unfamiliar. Now, let me say this at the very offset. You don't have to be necessarily from the Pennsylvania area. You don't have to be from Pittsburgh. You don't have to be from the Western Pennsylvania area. You don't have to be from the United States, necessarily, to be in the Yinzer Club. We welcome everybody. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, let me give you just sort of a definition of what a Yinzer is. A Yinzer is basically a native or inhabitant of the U.S. city of Pittsburgh or the Western Pennsylvania area. Now, when I say that, specifically Western Pennsylvania and specifically Pittsburgh, because if you go out to Philadelphia, you're not going to meet a Yinzer. You go to Harrisburg, you're not going to meet a Yinzer. You go to Scranton, you might meet people from the office, but you're not going to meet a Yinzer necessarily. So toward this area, basically where they got the term Yinzer is the fact that people, I believe, let me look on here. It says, what do you call someone from Pittsburgh? The one from Pittsburgh might be called Pittsburghese. The word Yinzer is also used among people who identify themselves as from the city of Pittsburgh and its traditions. That's not what I was looking for. Yinzer was historically used to identify the typical blue-collared people from the Pittsburgh region who often spoke with a heavy Pittsburgh accent. The term used for the word yins or yuns, that's actually the term my aunt uses. She always corrects me when I say yins, because she's like, no, it's yuns. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so a second person plural pronoun brought to the area by early Scotch-Irish immigrants. So sort of that accent. I guess they have that accent from the Ireland. I think that might have been Scottish. Either way, so they had this. I guess it sort of blended in with all these different accents, and now they got the Pittsburgh accent. And so that's basically a Yinzer. Because I've met people. I actually met a guy from Florida. He saw my one hat. I probably should be wearing it. It says It says Yins have a good day, because that's how I usually end my videos with Yinzer magazine videos that we do. And he said, "What's Yins? What's a Yinzer?" And I told him. He's like, "Okay." So he didn't understand. So I understand not everybody understands what a Yinzer is. In fact, let me say this: when I was growing up, there was this song that was played on the radio during Christmas time by a group called Johnny Angel and the Halos, and they called it Santa Claus is Coming Downtown. And I remember like all the adults around me laughing, and I didn't really get it, because you changed up the names, but in my view, as far as I knew, everybody talked like that. Everybody said Yins, everybody said Anat, everybody said Nebby. He's gonna find out he's Nebby and At. He's gonna go downtown. And so people around me talk like that. So I didn't get the joke at the time. I didn't realize it was specific to the Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area. That's not like I didn't know different accents. I knew there were Southern people and British people, or however and I can be awful at accents sometimes. But, so I didn't necessarily know what the joke was until I got older. And then I realized, we talk funny here in Pennsylvania. That's just sort of the introduction for those of you who don't know what a Yinzer actually is. In fact, there's a lot of, I guess you could say, terms that we apparently use around here. And I'm going to try to go through a couple of them. See if we can sort of understand best the local dialect of being someone from Western Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh. Now, here we go. First term is Allah. Not to be confused with the Muslim or Arab term for God. Allah means all the. Used in a sentence means Yinzer all the time jagging on me. Yinzer all the time being stupid and that. Anna, not to be confused with the female name Anna. It actually means and the. So here goes. Me and the boys went for a bike ride. So that's, just give you a little idea of some of these terms. Opposed to. Now this is one I think I used a lot growing up. Now, here's the thing too. Growing up, I had one of my English teachers. She was from Eastern Pennsylvania. And she really tried to drill my Yinzer accent out of me. And I think she did a pretty decent job, but not completely. But here's one I used a lot when I was younger. Opposed to, which means supposed to. Me and the boys are opposed to go hopping tonight down on the south side. So, for those of you, who aren't, opposed to means supposed to. Let's see if we can find another word. I know that. Okay, I know that. Okay, uses a verbal exclamation point. To know who won the Steelers game, Pens won, I know that. All right, space means I know that. So, interesting, right? For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Yinzer terms. Bless you. That's one I used to hear a lot growing up, one I actually used a lot. Bless you means bless you, for those of you who are more proper speaking English people. Bless you. Okay? I guess that's a sentence in itself. Somebody sneezes, you say, bless you, or bless you. Let's see. See if we can find some. I'm not completely familiar with all these, although a lot of them I did hear a lot growing up. Food shopping. For those of you who aren't familiar, it means grocery shopping. Yin's going food shopping at the Giant Eagle and that. Now again, here's another one. Giant Eagle means giant eagle, which is also a very popular grocery store in the area. So, eyes. Not these, not these, eyes. But like eyes as in, well, it means I was. Eyes so tired, I don't know. For some reason, every time I do it, I have to yell. Because, we're always very loud here in Pennsylvania. Anyway, I so tired when I got home from work that I missed the Stiller game. And it's possible, And that's when you're really tired, when you miss the Stiller game. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Stiller is actually the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers football team. Very good football team, by the way. So, go Steelers. Go Steelers. Oh, yeah, and some that maybe you're not familiar with. Some of you may not know the term slippy. And this is another one. I always thought it was the correct term. But apparently, according to my English teacher growing up, the correct term is slippery. Yeah. So, I would always tell my, people, hey, better watch out outside because it's slippy out. When the correct term was supposedly, according to regular English, was it's slippery out. There's another term, chipped ham. Chipped ham. Most people don't know what that is. And actually, I'm not even completely sure how to describe it. I guess it's ham that you cut into little slices. I think that's what it is. Apparently, people other than those around here don't even know what it is. So, there's that. There's dippy eggs. Dippy eggs are the eggs where you have the egg and you have the little yolk. It's still inside, and it's little dippy. It's got little kind of runs. It's dippy eggs. And my dad loved dippy eggs growing up, and apparently that's very exclusive to this area. So yeah, there you go. There's a few. We'll probably try to share some more in the future, but those are some Yinzer terms that maybe you're unfamiliar with. Just sort of give you a little bit of education, a little bit of understanding of who us strange people are here in western Pennsylvania and the Pittsburgh region. All right, moving on. I want to sort of maybe move on to a highlight, if you will. Sort of a getting to know yins. Now, normally when we do this, we would like to try to interview people and try to bring them onto the program and talk to them about who they are, the basically local people or people who might have a strange, or not strange, but unique hobby, or maybe they own a business, or maybe they are in charge of some sort of organization that we would like to highlight on here. We're definitely always looking forward to interviewing interesting people, and we definitely have some of those hopefully in the near future. We're going to try to get some actually in studio at the Idiot Radio Studio. But for right now, I'm going to try to talk about a gentleman who I can't necessarily say I met in person, but I do have an interesting story regarding him. And that is a gentleman by the name of Bruno Sammartino. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Bruno Sammartino was a professional wrestler back in, I would say probably, I believe he started in the 1950s and into the 1970s. And I believe he got as far as the 1980s before he officially retired. Then I think he went on to like doing commentary and things like that. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is from WWE.com. And this is what they say about him. During his childhood in a small Italian mountain town, Bruno Sammartino heard stories about how the streets in the United States were paved with gold. Though he believed it literally at the time, Sammartino would experience riches firsthand as the longest reigning WWE and most beloved competitor in the history of the squared circle. Now, offhand, it doesn't, right off the bat, it doesn't sound like, okay, well, he came from Italy. Now, that's where he started out. Eventually, he ended up in Pittsburgh, so let's get to that. Life wasn't so glorious for the Italian Superman. Bruno's brother and his sister both passed away at young ages, and Adolf Hitler's Nazi forces seized their town, but Bruno preserved his. He hid in a mountain called Valle Rocca, I think that's how you say it, during the German occupation, and eventually joined his immigrant father in Pittsburgh in 1950. So Sammartino began exercising at the local Young Men's Hebrew Association and grew to become one of the strongest men on the planet. After setting a world record in 1959 by bench pressing 565 pounds, Sammartino caught the eye of Mr. McMahon's father, Vincent J. McMahon, and went pro almost instantly. And so it goes on. Bruno became an overnight sensation, connecting with not only fellow Italians, but also Latinos, Greeks, and Jews, successfully bridging the gap in America's melting pot of wrestling fans. His legend continued to grow on May 17, 1963, when he defeated Buddy Rogers in just 48 seconds to become the second ever WWE champion, or WWF champion, WWF champion, I believe it was at the time, in front of nearly 20,000 fans at the old Madison Square Garden. Bruno would hold the WWE Championship for nearly 8 years, which is kind of unheard of today in any kind of sport, let alone professional wrestling or amateur wrestling or, the sports entertainment industry, actually. So, anyway, here we go. A household name all over the country. The beloved hero defended this title in legendary rivalries against WWE Hall of Famers Killer Kowalski, Gorilla Monsoon, and George the Animal Steele. In early 1968, Sammartino headlined the first wrestling event at the brand new Madison Square Garden just 8 days after it opened. And of course, he would actually go on to be one of the people to sell out the Garden more times than pretty much anybody. So, his final match, Bruno teamed up with the man many say he passed the torch to, Hulk Hogan. Many superstars have carried the torch for WWE since then, but it was Sammartino who lit the fire and became WWE's first genuine superstar. Now, where this has a connection with me is actually through my mother. My mother was a big wrestling fan back in the 1970s, and the WWF, as it was back in the day, came to her local hometown of Homer City. And these, wrestlers came and they wrestled at the old Homer Center High School. And my mother told me it was probably around 1972 that they came. And she went and she saw the likes of Bruno, Dominic DeNucci, George the Animal Steel, guys like that who came in. My mom actually told me, it was George Steele scared all the ladies because he'd bite the turnbuckle and stuff like that. So it was excuse me. So it was an interesting event for her to see that when they came to Homer City and had their show there at the Homer Dome. And so my mother, she got to meet some of the wrestlers, but the one she really wanted to meet was Bruno Sammartino, as I'm sure many people did. In fact, her and her friend, what was her name? Trying to remember. It was, she's going to hate me for not remembering this. But her and her best friend, actually waited outside of the arena where the wrestlers come out, hoping to meet Mr. Bruno Sammartino. And either he had left a different way, or he maybe have left during the show, because they were waiting after the show to meet him when all these wrestlers were coming out to their cars. And they waited, and eventually they just kind of gave up. The wrestlers had gone, the show was closed down, and they left. And so that was 1972. It was 1972 that happened. And fast forward 40-plus years later, I remember it was probably late 2017, I believe. I'm trying to remember if it was 2008. It was 2017. Yeah, it was the end of 2017, probably around October. I remember trying to think of a way to try to get my mom some sort of present for Christmas that might, sort of boost her spirits a little bit, I guess you could say. And I remembered that story she told me, how she really wanted to meet Bruno Sammartino back in 1972. Now, since then, she's no longer really a fan of wrestling anymore. She went on to be a mother and things like that, so she sort of got away from it. But she did tell me about the story, and she always told me how, Bruno was a big, strong guy, always wanted to meet him. And I couldn't do anything about getting him to meet her. It's not like I could, be like, Mr. Sammartino, Mr. Man in your 80s, could you please come from Pittsburgh and meet my mom? So I wrote him a letter. I found his address, and I wrote him a letter, and I thought I had the letter, but for some reason I don't, at least I can't find it right now. And I wrote him a letter. I told him the story in the letter of how my mother wanted to meet him over 40 years ago. And I not only sent him 2 photos, because I wanted an autograph too, and I also sent the amount of postage that it would cost to send it back. I sent it an enclosed envelope and the pictures, and I said, Mr. Sammartino, this is my mother. I also sent a picture of her, and I said, this is my mother, and she was a huge fan of yours back in the 1970s, and she never really got to meet you, but if you could at least give her a signed picture, if you could at least sign this picture and send it back to us, I feel like it would mean the world to her. That's basically what I said in the letter. And so, sent the letter out, and you never know what's going to happen when, I don't know how much fan mail he still gets, or still got, back at the time. And so I sent out the letter, didn't really think much about it, crossed my fingers, hoped that he would send the letter back, and I'd say about maybe a month later, around November, which is pretty cool, I got a letter back in the mail, and it was those 2 pictures that I had sent, and I'll be right back. And he had sent to me and my mother this, which is this picture signed, and he signed both pictures and sent them back, and so there you go. That's my story of Bruno Sammartino. What interestingly enough, if you will, he would end up passing away, I believe, I think it was like February or March of the following year. And so I guess you could say we got his autograph right in the nick of time. But really, I remember when I showed it to my mom, she was like really excited because, this is somebody that she liked watching him wrestle back in the 1970s. In fact, at one point she had like all these newspaper clippings from when him and the WWF came to Homer City and things like that, and she really enjoyed it. And so that's sort of my story about him. If you have the time, go on to YouTube, or I guess if you're a subscriber to the WWE Network, I don't know if they have it on YouTube or not, but look up his acceptance speech at the WWE Hall of Fame, and you get probably a better picture of who he was back when he accepted it. Back, I believe it was 2013 when he did that. But again, that's my story about him. And so, that's sort of my spotlight, if you will, with just a tad of a personal story there about the great Bruno Sammartino. And so there you go. I guess from here, we're going to try to move on from this to an interview that I did. This was done back in February. Not sure exactly when this episode is going to go up, but it came out in February. And it was an interview I did with a local organization in the Indiana County area, which is all part of the Western Pennsylvania area. And it's the Blairsville Area Underground Railroad Society, or Historical Center. And we interviewed a woman by the name of Denise Jennings Doyle and talked to her about the Underground Railroad in the local area and their role in helping many of the African Americans who were fleeing slavery. And it's a very interesting interview if you want to check it out right now. Hello, Yinzers. My name is Abraham Klein. Today I'm here with Denise Jennings Doyle. We're here at the Underground Railroad, Blairsville Underground Railroad Society building, and she's going to tell us a little about, the involvement of Blairsville in the Underground Railroad, as well as, things about the actual society.
Sure. The Blairsville Area Underground Railroad, our association was founded about 14 years ago with a group of individuals from the Blairsville Area Historical Society and the Blairsville Improvement Group at that time. And our society was basically founded on the story of Richard Newman. Now, Richard Newman, we have a marker commemorating him in his honor, but at that time we believed his name to be Newton. Until I uncovered some more research that his name was Richard Newman. So what had happened was there were two prominent Underground Railroad conductors in the Blairsville area. One was Louis Johnston, who was a man of color, and he'd been enslaved in Deary Township, just over the river, and John Graff, who was a wealthy merchant in town. And Richard Newman had been living openly and freely here in Blairsville for approximately 6 years. And then into town, on April 1st, 1858, came three men. One was a Mr. Stump from Old Virginia, Hampshire County, we believe, and he was either the man who had enslaved or a relative of the man who had enslaved Richard Newman. A bounty hunter from Uniontown, who was a tailor. His name was Peter Heck. And the Deputy United States Marshal for the Western District of Pennsylvania, and his name is Mr. Frost. So they came into Blairsville, and Stump had spotted Richard Newman in the doorway of Mulholland's store, and he said to Heck, please quickly go and grab him and throw him into the street, and then we'll come and help you. So he had approached Richard Newman and went to throw him into the street, and was subsequently flung himself into the street because, honestly, how hard would you fight for your freedom? And Richard Newman was doing thusly. So the other two had come and helped to subdue Richard Newman, but at the same time, a crowd of angry Blairsville people had gathered and a melee ensued. So we had a large group of African Americans and a number of the white people of Blairsville surrounded the men. They started beating them. They started pelting them with rocks and sticks. And so the mayor of Blairsville, his name was Chester Davis, was called. and the constable, whose name was George Wilkinson. They were both called to subdue the crowd because the crowd was calling for the lynching of these three men. Well, Stump was so nervous he discharged his pistol into the crowd, and luckily it didn't harm anyone. Also on the spot, on the street, was a man by the name of Peter Leslie, who was a geologist by happenstance, and the physician who used to practice in Blairsville, who was the personal physician of Senator Charles Sumner, the man who was beaten in chambers over the slavery issue. So they happened upon the scene and helped subdue the crowd, right? So in the meantime, the people of Blairsville were able to free Richard and get him out of there, and then further north on the Underground Railroad, which is unfortunate because he'd been living well here in town. So by the time that this Peter Leslie and Charles Jackson, Dr. Jackson, got to our train station, which still stands in town, they found 30 armed men hiding inside. And across the street in a barn were 50 armed men. And Peter Leslie said that he believed that within 36 hours, Indiana County could pull together 3,000 good and true men. So that's pretty impressive. So we at the Underground Railroad, we are dedicated to preserving the history of the Underground Railroad, but it is to honor the men, the women, and the children who use this network to freedom, because without them, John Graff is just a merchant, and Lewis Johnston was just a coal hauler. So that's pretty important, and we've been able to identify in Indiana County over 90 Underground Railroad conductors, men, women, teens who worked, people of color, and the white residents of Indiana County who worked to help the freedom seekers on their way to Canada.
Wow. So you mentioned about the society as it is right now. It's been around for about 14 years. Was Blairsville aware of this prior to that?
Yes.
Or did it, okay.
Yes.
All right.
So we had already had this historic marker, the PHMC marker, which is down at our diamond. Again, we had said that it was the rescue of Newton. But thank you to the people who digitize newspapers and records, we were able to find more timely pieces written in 1858 in April that stated that his name in more than one account was Richard Newman. So yes, they were aware of that, but not a lot was done to preserve and promote this history. And then it was, we became aware that there was a grant available through Pennsylvania. And so we applied for the grant. Well, it turned out it was a marketing grant. It's really hard to market a story when you have nothing else. So we immediately embarked on research, and we planned an event which was an anti-slavery rally that we had at the Diamond. And in the meantime, we started writing and scripting this, the rescue of Richard Newman, which has National Park Service status as an educational program. And then we thought, well, those are good things to market, but we really need a location. So this was the Second Baptist Church, and it was home to the oldest, predominantly African-American congregation, but they were no longer using it because they had built another location in town. So we rented it from them until we reached $5,000, and then they sold it to us for $1. So it's been our home ever since, and you can see we have a number of exhibits. We have this, it's an interactive exhibit called A Day in the Life of an Enslaved Child, and we've incorporated, as you can see, technology in with our exhibit, and then information about Blairsville and their role in the Underground Railroad in the distance. And then brief history of Africa that kind of explains how we have moved from pretty much the birthplace of humanity to chattel enslavement, you know, and explains a little bit about that. And then general Underground Railroad history in Indiana County, ending then with Indiana County's involvement in the raid on Harper's Ferry by John Brown, because Indiana County resident Albert Hazlitt was part of that. And then, of course, we have a little area with a television and some videos that we've produced in cooperation with IUP over the years.
Okay. You mentioned about Mr. Newman and the whole incident that occurred with him. Was this something that happened frequently, or was this like the only known?
Oh,
example?
no. Oh, there were a number of incidents. Actually, it was an incident in 1845 that it's widely believed that turned the tide of indifference to activism in Indiana County. It happened in our county seat in 1845 when a young man was abducted by the agents of the people who had enslaved him and were taking him back down to Hardin County, West Virginia today. That was Old Virginia then. And so the people of Indiana rose up and mobbed, and he was freed by the courts the very next day by Judge Thomas White of White Township, surrounds Indiana. So those are just two of these larger incidents, but we have a really well-preserved history which talks about, there were Underground Railroad conductors that could shoot the bloodhound off the saddle in front of the slave catchers.
Wow.
Which sounds kind of harsh, but these were not nice dogs. These dogs were bred to hunt people and tear them apart. So we really, we work to continue uncovering these stories. Why we happen to know so much was a teenage Underground Railroad conductor by the name of A.T. Moorhead. Like his grandfather, before him was a newspaper editor, and so he published a series of articles in 1899 talking about his own first-hand accounts.
Wow.
So we were very, very lucky to have had A.T. Moorhead as a teenager, who was an Underground Railroad conductor himself. So we exist, and we have events throughout the year.
Yes, I was going to ask, what are some of the events that you guys have throughout the year?
Well, typically we do one or two town tours. Last year, we toured Philadelphia Street, and along the way, as we were interpreting historic buildings and telling some histories, you met 8 historic figures who told their stories. We've done that in Blairsville, and then, so I think we're talking the end of May for the tours, whether they're going to be here in Blairsville or they're going to be in Indiana. Check our website, Underground Railroad, BlairsvillePA.com, all typed out, for our events. And then we always do a cemetery tour. Okay. So that is, I believe, the second Saturday in October, and that's in the Blairsville Cemetery on Market Street. And you tour the cemetery, and we interpret the art from headstones, because there's a lot of symbolism in those, and you meet people along the way.
Okay.
So, and then we do have one Black History Month event that's coming up.
I believe you said the 27th, right?
27th, yes. Okay. So we are working in cooperation with the Indiana County Historic and Genealogical Society and our Indiana County NAACP, and of course the Blairsville Area Underground Railroad. And our event is at the History Center in Indiana at the Historical Society. And we will feature music and of Patty Holmes, and some interpretations of our space here from some St. Francis University students who toured a week and a half ago. And then we will have some stories that are told by firsthand interpreters, who are going to interpret Anthony Hollingsworth, who had a great impact on Indiana County. He was featured in that story in 1845 that I just related. Yeah. And Underground Railroad conductor Louis Johnston's wife, Jane Brunson Johnston, is going to be sharing the stories of her family and her husband.
Okay. Real quick, if people would like to learn more about what you guys do, I guess maybe give a location of where you guys are
Yes.
at.
So we are located at 214 Southeast Lane here in Blairsville, in what used to be a church. So you can reach us with our phone number. It's 724-343-1014, or you could call me directly, 724-599-8105. We can be reached by email, blairsvilleUGRR@yahoo.com. Right now, our tours of the museum, we're only open upon request, scheduling an appointment. But we're hoping to expand that in the future if we can find additional funding. And our website is, again, undergroundrailroadblairsvillepa.com.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been Abraham Klein here today with Denise Jennings-Roll talking about the Blairsville Area Underground Railroad Society. I'm sure, come on down. It's still Black History Month. Be a great opportunity to come by.
So this has been Abraham Klein for Yinzer Club saying, Yins, have a great day.